Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and this is a little bit of an awkward video to make. I took a look at the VSS clone being made by BSD Fabrication Works at SHOT Show. I was not planning to publish anything about it because of what I saw. I figured I would just let this one go because my gut feeling is that we will not be seeing a lot from this project in the future. However, it is getting a tremendous amount of traction online from a whole bunch of people at SHOT Show who took a look at it, who didn't take it apart, and I think who didn't know what questions to ask or what things to look at on it. What they saw was a nice looking copy of a VSS, and were told that they were going to be available at a high price in 9 to 12 months from now, and they got very excited about it. And I totally get that, because I would love to have a VSS. I think it's a super cool gun. I think there is absolutely a market for them in the United States as reproductions, but I'm not confident in this particular one. And, well, BSD says they're not going to take people's money in advance for pre-orders, which means no one has anything to lose from this. BSD should absolutely go forth and knock it out of the park. As I told them, a bunch of great things have been done by people who were straight up told to their face that these great things were impossible, and people went and did it anyway. And I will be absolutely happy to totally eat my words in 9 to 12 months when BSD releases functional production VSSs. I would like nothing more. But when I was done at the end of our chat and some filming, they told me they'd send me one, and I refused it. I will absolutely pay for one, absolute full retail price, as soon as they're ready. And I mean that fully. But I mean it in part because fundamentally, I don't think that I'll ever have to make good on that promise. Believe I will, but I don't think it'll actually come to that. So now, again, let me be clear. They said they're not going to take people's money as pre-orders, which means no one has anything to lose, which means none of my criticism will actually negatively affect anything that they're going to do, because they're not dependent on convincing a lot of people to send them money before guns are ready, because they're not going to take that money, which is excellent. So, knowing that, why am I concerned about this project? Well, first off, their timeline is literally insane. The idea that they could have that gun ready for production in 9 to 12 months is completely impossible. They have built one gun. They had two there. One of them was, they described it as a proof of concept built on AR parts. It's an AR bolt. I don't know the exact internals. I didn't actually take that one apart, but it's obviously an AR-15 bolt carrier. You can see it from the outside. And they were very clear that that's not what they're planning on actually producing. They were going to make a true, honest clone of the VSS action. You have two of these. The one out there is the proof of concept AR mechanism, which is not what you're going to be actually producing.
Not for the moment.
It's going to be okay. Cool.
We have some ideas on how we kind of want to move forward with new designs later in the future, but for now we know this works. So why reinvent the wheel?
They have one of those guns. Not all of the parts on it were made by them. By their admission, the top cover on it is borrowed from a client's parts kit of a real VSS. It's a Russian top cover. So I guess this is, actually, you told me earlier, this is an original part.
Yeah. Actually, this comes from a kit that one of my clients asked me to build them, and I asked him personally, can I borrow the cover for the show, because I don't have time to build another one. He said yes.
The suppressor is produced by B&T. By the way, that's something that I just want to make sure people are clear on as well. This says in no way a B&T project. The gun was displayed at B&T's booth, because B&T are really cool, nice people who want to support small companies that are doing this sort of reproduction, and B&T manufactured the suppressor for them. They sent B&T a CAD file of here's what the front end of the barrel looks like that we need you to attach to, and here's what we want the suppressor to look like. And B&T, because they work very quickly and they're happy to work on very small minimum orders, made a suppressor for the thing. They 3D printed an awesome modern suppressor, but that is the extent of B&T's involvement with this project. They don't know anything about its development. It's not theirs. They're not selling it. They're not involved in it. They just made a suppressor to order for that gun. And were nice enough to let it be displayed in their booth, because a little small shop like BSD is going to have it's going to be very expensive for them to get their own booth at SHOT Show. So with that aside, the top cover was not made by BSD. BSD has, what they told me is they have never manufactured a complete gun before. This is their first firearm project. Is this your first complete gun project?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is an absolute doozy of a first project to get into. A lot of people think that the VSS, they just assume it's an AK variant because it's got an AK looking mag, it's got a stamped top cover, it's got a rotating bolt. It looks like it's just someone's modified silenced AK. It is not. I have a full video on the VSS. I'll link to it below. If you don't know what the internals look like, go check out that video. And it's completely different. There's literally 0 parts compatibility, interchangeability between an AK and a VSS. The mechanisms are different. The VSS does not have a hammer. It is a striker firing system vaguely similar to the VZ58. Certainly not interchangeable with that either, but it's a striker. There's no hammer in it. So the trigger mechanism is fundamentally different. The firing pin setup is fundamentally different. The bolt is a 6-lug rotating bolt. It has, other than the fact they both rotate, it has nothing in common with an AK bolt. You cannot modify an AK bolt to be a VSS bolt or vice versa. And it's a complicated bolt to make too. The bolt carriers are different. There's nothing in similarity. So what BSD is claiming that they are going to do is put into production a complete operating system made from scratch that nobody in the United States has manufactured. The only VSSs that have ever been made have been in Russian factories, and BSD says they're going to do this in the next 9 to 12 months. Now, next bit, if you showed me the parts from BSD's gun and you did not tell me where they came from, I would tell you that these look like they are original Russian production parts. BSD was quite clear, with the exception of the top cover, that those were their parts. I asked them if they reverse engineered a gun to get them. I was concerned, my concern is, okay, maybe they got one gun and they did a bunch of laser scanning or measuring of some sort, and they came up with dimensions. The problem is, if you do that, if you reverse engineer one firearm, you do not know what the tolerances are. You don't know how much, so let's be clear, tolerance doesn't mean how big the space is between parts. Tolerance means how accurate do we have to manufacture every individual dimension on a given part so that the parts will interchange properly. So for example, if you look at the follower of an AR-15 magazine, there's an opening between the edges of the follower and the edge of the magazine. The tolerance on that is huge because you could make that thing a millimeter wider or narrower and it would still work just fine. The tolerance on, say, the front face of the locking lugs on an AR-15 is very much tighter because it has to interact properly with the trunnions. So you have to make the trunnions to a very high level of accuracy and the bolt lugs to a high level of accuracy, but the required accuracy is different for every dimension of every single part. And you can't just say, well, we'll make them all perfect, because that's a physical impossibility. There is always variation in your machining. And the closer you have to be to perfect, the more time and the more scrap you're going to create in the process of manufacturing. And if you reverse engineer one gun, you have one set of discrete numbers, and you have no idea if any given dimension in it is at the very top of your allowable tolerance or at the very bottom. And this is why this is one of the major elements of re-engineering a firearm, is figuring out what is our allowable tolerance on all of these different parts. So my concern was, did they just get one gun? What they told me was they have a complete CAD file for the whole gun, and they can't tell me where they got it. So you said you have you have CAD files for the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Where did they come from?
I can't disclose that.
Okay.
We put some together, modified them.
To me, that sounds like this is all sketchy gray market stuff that they've assembled a couple of parts kits, and some people out of Russia gave them various pieces of technical data package, which is fine, but that is not necessarily a sufficient basis for manufacturing parts. I asked them if they were going to be making parts themselves or if they were going to be subcontracting, outsourcing the manufacture, and the answer was they're going to be outsourcing the manufacturing. Are these parts that you have capacity to manufacture, or are you going to be outsourcing?
We will be outsourcing,
like subcontracting the parts?
The amount of demand that we're seeing right now, it's going to have to be outsourced.
When it came to stamping, looking at this top cover, like, okay, this one's borrowed. What's your experience stamping? Like, are you guys going to be able to stamp top covers and selector levers and butt plates and the other pieces on the VSS that are stamped? And what they told me was straight up, they have no stamping experience.
Okay. What sort of stamping stuff have you done before?
None.
Okay.
I don't stamp.
Okay.
When you see a flat piece of paper, you can understand how to make a template and fold it. It's just...
That's a manufacturing technique that one does not simply pick up overnight. We had a bit more discussion about what was involved in that, and the answers, the things that they told me made me even more confident that they just don't know the challenge that they're getting into, which does not mean they can't do it. Again, let me be clear, if they're not taking people's money in advance, then they can tell me to F right off and go do it anyway, and no one's hurt for it. And again, I'll buy the first gun that comes off the production line ready to go. But this is a significant undertaking. Like, the top cover is a significant undertaking. I want to just point out the contrast here to Insight Armory's Reproduction SVD that we also saw at SHOT Show. They had one of their own production stamped top covers, and it was beautiful. And they understand the difficulty of doing it. And they've spent 4 years, 4 or 5 years, working on that project to get it to the point where it is now, where it will allegedly also be ready by the end of this year. BSD told us that they spent 7 weeks putting their prototype together, and they'll have it done. They'll have guns in production by the end of the year. This, of course, makes me extremely dubious. The fact that the condition of their parts, the way the internals of that gun look, with the exception of the barrel and the receiver, are, if I take them at their word that these are parts that they manufactured, then it means they are extremely qualified, and they are in fact going to knock it out of the park, because those parts look exactly like they should be. They got some filing marks on them. They said they had to do a little bit of hand fitting to put the gun together. But those parts look as good as Russian parts, which means either they're really good or they are Russian parts. Again, BSD is very clear that those are not Russian parts. That's what they told me. They've manufactured that, and they said they had one additional set of parts, so they had a backup. If they had not been very clear that they weren't going to take people's money in advance, the situation, like the hypothetical that I see, that I have seen happen, that we've seen happen in slow motion with other companies and in fast motion with some companies. The scenario that I myself fell victim to once, many years ago, which led me to admonish people to never prepay for a speculative firearms project. The hypothetical that I see happening, if BSD hadn't already been very clear that they weren't going to do this, is a group like this, 3 guys, would get very excited by the excitement and the promo and the reaction that they got from displaying this gun at SHOT Show. They would quit their day jobs and go 100% in on making VSSs, knowing that there's a huge market for them and everyone's excited and they're excited and it's an awesome, cool project. But they're not making their own parts, they're subcontracting them, so they're going to send out CAD files, blueprints for parts to third-party companies to manufacture, and most of the time, the first parts you get back from a subcontractor like that aren't going to quite work. You're going to pay for them, because every single part that you subcontract out, you're paying out of pocket. It's not your own time, it's someone else's time, so you have to pay for it. So the first parts that this hypothetical team would get back would not work, because they would not be to drawings. However, this hypothetical team, if let's say they hypothetically had just a set of sketchy Russian gray market blueprints, well, those probably have some problems in them as well. And so once the subcontractors are making parts correct to the drawings, then the team has to figure out how to fix the drawings so the guns actually go together. That process is going to take a lot of time. It is also going to involve making sure that they have the right metallurgy, the right steels for the right parts, because you're using a different material for, not necessarily for every part, but you're going to have several different steels for different elements of the gun. You're going to have different heat treat regimens for different parts. The locking lugs on those VSSs and the cam lugs are pretty darn small, and they're going to have to be very tough. And that means they have to be a steel that is tough. It's not too brittle, it's not too soft, it's Goldilocks, just right in the middle with the right heat treat to do it. This process is going to take a lot of money of trial and error of parts back and forth. And the hypothetical team that I have pictured in my head would go through all of their existing savings in probably about 6 months. And then they would be in a very tricky situation where everything they have is invested in this project. But if they don't have more money to put into it, it all falls apart and they have nothing. And so they would look to where can we get money? And the only, the obvious source, the easy source, and perhaps the only seemingly viable source would be to sell pre-orders for the gun in advance to bring in the capital, which they would, I'm sure, in good faith expect, like, we just need a little bit more money, like $20,000, $30,000, and we can fix the problem that we had with the bolt. We can get the good bolts, and then we can assemble the first guns, and it'll be good. And the problem is there's always another issue that comes up. It always takes more time. You always have to fix another thing, and they would blow through that additional pre-sale money that they had. And maybe they would be able to do a second run of this. Maybe they'd be able to bring in some more money from some additional pre-sales. They would raise the price and say, you know, okay, we initially thought it was going to be $7,500. It's actually going to be $8,500. But if you prepay and put $5,000 down, or put the whole $7,500 down now, you can get it for the original price and not the higher price that we're going to charge everyone when it's finally done. And this cycle would go back and forth until eventually they ran out of cash and they ran out of people willing to pre-order. And then the whole project sinks, and everybody who's invested in it by pre-buying is out their money because there is no money left to get back. That would be the hypothetical that I would be extremely concerned about seeing on a reproduction firearms project. So that is, of course, entirely hypothetical because, like I said, BSD was quite clear that they are not going to take people's money in advance. So I will tell people right here, do not pay for prospective reproduction firearms projects in advance. I got bit by it. I put $7,500 into an early FG42. This has nothing to do with Rick Smith in Texas. His guns are awesome. They came later. I didn't have $7,500 to spend when I did this, but that gun was so cool, and the one prototype sample that they had was so good that I put the money in anyway. And it's gone. Never got it back. The money's spent. The gun never happened. So don't make that same mistake yourself. And when you see reproductions, I'm trying to be better and better about accurately understanding what the likelihood of different reproduction projects is to truly come to fruition and show that to you guys. So if you see people just hyping the gun without anything, without seeing any of the background, always be skeptical. We can always be very hopeful, and I wish BSD absolutely the best. Once again, I will buy their first gun off the line, 100% full retail price, whatever they price it at. But I won't prepay for one, and hopefully you won't either.
But it's just I've worked with metal for so long and built different things, not guns in general, that it just became like a sixth sense to like how to just feel when something's right and when it's not right, and then I guess based on that, just take measurements and confirm. The top cover rubs on the bolt inside. That's why it's a little bit rough back there.